Hello and welcome to Let's Waffle. Big week in State League footy with a big state game. Ross Lewis here with John Townsend. John, good win for WA, but only just 6 points, almost a bit of embarrassment for the Black Swans.
Yes, it was. They took it a bit easy at the end after being 44 points up early in the last quarter. It was that sort of game though. It was high score. Both sides kicked 16. Not much defence in the game at all from both sides. Hard running, pretty spectacular stuff. There were some really good moments. Ryan Brabazon kicked a sensational goal. Ruck knocked straight down his throat, ran to the front of the square, kicked a long goal. Dane Zorko at the end kicked 2 in a minute to get them back within range, and the second of them was a 70-metre scrubby punt that he picked. It was slippery and wet, and he's
big barrel.
He's gone the low barrel. And he skidded it through. Very smart stuff, but they just ran out of time, and WA sort of put the boots on and did the chipping backwards and that sort of stuff to ensure there was no embarrassment. But pretty good result, I reckon. Good for state footy. Queensland clearly on the rise. We saw them play WA in Townsville 3 years ago in 08, and that was tight for a half until WA stepped it up and ran away from them. But they're a very competitive side. They had some pretty good players there, and as WA have done for the last several years, we've recruited a player, or the WAFL has recruited a player out of the Queensland team. I think out of the last 3 matches, I don't know who it's going to be next year, but Dane Zorko would be a fair bet, I reckon.
It was a fair foreign legion though for Queensland, wasn't it? They could pick just about anybody on the planet to play for them. So probably comparing it to the team of 3 years ago, the Queensland side of 3 years ago, might be a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, they obviously drew in players from the Northern Territory. They had Albert Proud, who was on the Brisbane list. There was a bloke who'd been on the turtle soup diet for a while too. I mean, he was like a very good amateur who would play well for 30 seconds and then you wouldn't see it for 10 minutes. And then he'd get his wind back and off he'd go, and dangerous around goals. Good game, well worth the trip down there. The facility is outstanding. I took the train down from Perth actually, Ross. And it's about 25 minutes quicker than driving, and it's a 5-minute walk from the train station. So, don't know if I'll be doing that again in a hurry, because at 7 o'clock at night, walking back through the vegetation's a bit of an issue. But
things are tight at 7 West Media nowadays. You can't afford vehicles. Yeah. It's a little bit of a train pass.
Once upon a time, there would have been a chopper taking us down, and maybe that might still happen.
That might happen with our TV brothers.
Yes, but well worth the trip. Excellent result, I think, for football. WA, you'd think we're going to win. Great facility, big crowd, pushing up towards 4,000. So it was a win all round. I think state footy's still going pretty well.
Well, we were a bit remiss to not advise people where we are today, John. Being a state game week, we thought we'd move around to somewhere which reflected a bit of former glory for the Black Swans. So we're in the Joe Fancy studio today.
Joe Fancy's golden boots.
It is. How many times has he sold those?
Well, about as many as Dennis Lilly sold the ball that he took 8 for 29 at the Wacker with, I think. Yeah, Joe Fancy, when WA won that carnival in Brisbane in 1961, so a few years ago now.
Now, apparently there were some 1961 members down at Rushton Park, or Bendigo Bank Stadium at the weekend. How come no one told us about it?
Oh, well, you'd expect the WAFL to have a promotions and marketing arm for that to happen, and we know that they don't have one.
I mean, it was highly significant. It is 50 years since one of our greatest state achievements, and at a time when the state league's under microscope because of a wanted AFL incursion, you would have thought that we might have been singing the praises of one of our great events.
Well, we certainly would have if we'd known that they were going to be down there. So, yeah, some great names. Hayden Bunton there, of course. In the AFL Hall of Fame. Keith Slater was down there, Lorne Cook, Derek Chadwick, a lot of great names from WA's past, and interesting, Chadwick and Slater, 2 blokes who played cricket at the highest level as well. So I mean, that's another element, I guess, of sport that has changed significantly. You're not going to get too many players doing that ever again.
7 losing grand finals for Derek Chadwick?
He played from 59 to 72, and they lost in 72 when he was injured, and he'd retired that season. Sorry, they won in 72, and he lost. I think he played in all those sides in the 60s.
Did Claremont not beat East Perth in 4 games that year and lost in the grand final?
No, I reckon. No, I reckon Claremont won the home games and East Perth won their home games. I think
7 grand finals. I think I know people who went to every one of those.
Sad moments if you're an East Perth supporter, isn't it? There's there's a little bit of glory in recent times for the Royals, but geez, there's a lot of heartache along the way as well, Ross.
I think there might be some more heartache to come as well. State game, we'll go through it bit by bit. The big controversy of the game, obviously a 6-point margin, was of great interest, but what happened with the Simpson medal? Someone that should have a second medal around their neck hasn't got one this week.
Yes, Luke Blackwell, very, very stiff. He came second in the Sandover last year, and he came second in the Simpson on Saturday. The only difference was, if he equalled the votes in the Sandover last year, he would have shared it, but because he was equal with Josh Smith, he didn't win it because they decided that the umpires' votes count, and the umpires, and that was Stuart Parry, Chris Pattinson, and I'm surprised that he got a game because he's certainly not in their best 3 or 4 umpires, and Andrew Stevens from the NEAFL. They didn't give Luke Blackwell a vote, and for a bloke who had 41 touches and was pretty damaging, and certainly in the first half when WA set it up, he was comfortably BOG at half time, and he had I think about 28 touches to half time. For him to miss out, one because it was shared, and then they decided there was a tie-break system was reintroduced after it was abandoned in most football codes years ago. And then to not get a vote from the umpires is just absolute travesty.
I suppose we need to paint the picture that 2 radio stations and the umpires all had 5, 4, 3, 2 votes. Josh Smith and Luke Blackwell both had 10 after the voting. However, the WAFL decided that to split the vote, they would go with the umpires' votes only, and if Luke didn't get a vote, the award went to Josh Smith. Why?
Well, why have the second and third voting members of the panel if you're not going to use them?
Football has a great tradition of breaking ties through countback method. Why wasn't that adopted? Now, Tim Roberts has given the instruction that the WAFL clubs agreed to this system of the umpires having basically the casting vote. How they came up with that idea has just got me absolutely baffled. And the other one is, why are 2 radio stations giving votes on the game? I would have thought that the West Australian, and through the west.com.au, has given the WAFL more publicity and more coverage than any media outlets in town, and to give it to a community radio station, I think was pretty poor form.
Bit of a slap in the face, you reckon, for those who support them more than others?
Well, you know, there's a lot of work that's been done by 7 West Media through its outlets, and some of those other outlets turn up on a Saturday and broadcast to about 3 people. So, you know, I think,
which is not, I mean, it's not taken away from the judges, because Jackson Crabb was he was the judge for.
Well, if you've got one radio station, you don't need a second one, and it may have been better to have given it to another set of eyes sitting in a different part of the ground.
I'm sure that if they had given it to the West, that Luke Blackwell would have got the same 5 votes that he got from the radio. But yeah, your point is well made. Interesting, the operations manager said it was a decision of the media manager, and the media manager said it was a decision of the operations manager. So even the WAFL people can't get their story straight.
Well, I think that the voting needs to be changed. The process is, again, we're commenting now on a farcical situation with a medal. How many times do we do this with the WAFL, where there's an event after the event or during the event that we're supposed to be covering, which overshadows, you know, the matches that are played?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Smith was very good in the second half, but he did nothing in the first half. And actually, his quote in the paper during the week, "I didn't really touch it in the first half, to be honest." Well, I think that everyone that was the game knew that, and he spent a fair bit of that first half off the field. He was very good, 6 contested marks inside 50 in the third quarter, and in the third quarter. In the second half, he was clearly the best player in the competition, but not over the 4 quarters. Yes, I don't know how much further we can take it, but I thought it was pretty ordinary form. I mean, it's
embarrassing, isn't it? Yeah. Everyone's now embarrassed over this, and we're talking about it instead of maybe looking at the problem for WA with only beating a minnow state by 6 points, or conversely the rise of Queensland as an interstate.
There's a lot of positives out of the footy. I think in grand finals in the last 30 odd years or 40 years there've been 2 ties. I think David Pretty and Gary Gibolini shared in 74, and Maurice Rioli and Gary Shaw in 81. So
Gary Shaw was a Queenslander too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, and he probably could have been playing for him. I think he might have played actually state footy for Queensland back in the late 70s before he went to the Tigers and then on to Collingwood. There is absolutely no reason that you can't share it.
No.
I mean, apart from the fact that they would have taken 1 medal. That's the other embarrassing point. They would have taken 1 medal when they played in Melbourne about 4 years ago. They didn't take a medal, and they had to borrow one from a previous winner for the presentation. I mean, that's look, we understand that it's hard to get, cover every base, but there are some things that you think are just pretty basic, and you just get them written into, you get your match, I guess your match book from this year's game, and it goes forward to next year's game, and you just do it as a matter of course.
Clubs have got to have a look at that. Very quickly, you've got some news on the coaching of the state side for next year, and maybe just toss up who we're going to line up against next year.
Yes, Brian Dawson did a pretty good job, and as he said, he's now won his last 3 games. So, and he won one of them by a point and another one by 6 points. So things pretty tight. Luckily, you've got a very calm and collected fellow in Brian Dawson. He would like to do it again. Presumably the first right of refusal will go to the premiership coach, but Dawson made a very good point about it, and he said that the week leading into the Shield to the state game was as busy as the week leading into the grand final last year, as far as the coach says, and he certainly made the point after the game and then a couple of days later when I spoke to him that getting a club coach who are now operating probably 50 or 60 hours a week, it's very difficult for them to give the time that's required to actually coach a state team. And one suggestion that he made was that if that was to happen, that the state's coach should perhaps, his team should have a bye leading into the game, but then you've got a situation where the presumably a good team, if it's the premiership team,
has a double bye.
Now 2 teams obviously going to have that, unless it goes back to even teams next year, and never rule out anything, Ross, but that's another can of worms. But a very interesting point about the commitment required, and he certainly said that the first 2 weeks, not a lot of commitment, but in the 2 leading into the game, the amount of research done on the opposition, the preparation and the planning, makes for pretty much a full-time job, and that's something I think that the WAFL have to take into account when you have a look at who are the, if we go on the top 4, McPhee will be coaching WAFL next year if they win the flag. You think Monaghan will be if they win the flag. Malaxis you think would be it if they win it, and Dimmer if they win it. Do one of those blokes want to do it? Well, it's a good feather in the cap. It's like playing state footy, obviously, but interesting about the ramifications about whether you can do it well enough to give the job justice is a point that I think will become increasingly pointed, I guess, as time goes on. I think we're playing South Australia in South Australia, probably at Adelaide Oval, maybe a night game in front of 20,000 people would be fantastic if that happened. Maybe 10,000.
There's a bit of redevelopment already happening at Adelaide Oval, a lot more to come.
Yeah, well they still play a lot of sample footy at Adelaide Oval.
Very dodgy
not
pocket.
still, but yeah. It's changed. Well, yeah, but it's changed. The ground's changed because of when they did the western stands were rebuilt last year. The ground has become a lot more of a traditional oval rather than the lozenge that it used to be.
Well, that's part 1 of Let's Waffle from the Joe Fancy studio. We'll be back after the break to talk about everything leading into round 14 of WAFL 2011.